Well, hey everyone, welcome to the Deep Drive podcast. I'm Jake with my friend Dante yet again, and we're here to reflect on Easter at Real Life. Such an incredible weekend every single year, one of my favorites. Everybody's in a good mood, everybody's ready to celebrate. Some people dress up, other people don't, but that's okay. It doesn't really matter around here. Dante, tell me a little bit about what do you love about Easter at Real Life? What are the highlights for you?
Yeah, I mean, since a kid, Easter's always been a big deal in my family. And I remember the lead up to it, this anticipation that it was going to be a special service, families all getting together after church, and my mom, who is one of my favorite people, but also one of the funniest people I know. For her, it wasn't good enough just to say Easter. No, this is Resurrection.
There you go.
Sunday.
Get specific.
And so it's all those things of just this is a big deal.
Yeah.
And we dressed up and all the things. Not a lot of chocolate or Easter bunny stuff in our family though, which I feel like I got robbed out of because everybody else was getting Easter baskets. I was getting early morning rise services. And
so not only did you not get chocolate, you had to get up real early and go to church. All right, fair enough. One of the amazing parts of this church is our volunteer teams that just give everything all the time, and not just on the holiday weekends but on regular weekends as well. It takes hundreds of people to make that so successful. I walk away from every Easter weekend how did that happen? How were there that many people? But you've been hanging out in our kids and student area a lot more these days.
Yeah.
Any volunteers that especially jump out to you as to somebody you want to celebrate and appreciate?
And there's so many good ones, and I've had the privilege of really being, with sort of our little ones, so 2-year-old, 3-year-olds, and anybody who spends any time in those classes, really my hat goes off. It's a lot. You're trying to wrangle 25 3-year-olds who are all hyped up, just had their donut, is incredible. But there's one lady, Brenda, who just does an incredible job. And at her time, she also has a couple special needs kids in her classroom, which add a whole different level of what do we do with this? And one of the young kids in there, he's strong and he's quick. Mm-hmm. And so in about 2 bounds, he's over that little gate. And so to try to teach, watch, you've got this added pressure, but every week they show up, every week they do a great job. So to Brenda and all of those volunteers, just want to say thank you guys for doing what you do.
Super grateful. The people that are at Real Life are so special in so many different ways, and I always want to make sure that we keep as a church our heart for people at the forefront. Yeah. This isn't perfunctory. It's not something that we just do because we're supposed to, but it's for people so that other people can find and follow Jesus. That's our whole reason why we show up. And a couple weekends ago, I was working the campus after service, and I know you do this too. When we walk around, we've got eyes for people, and I often try to find anyone that's alone and greet them, welcome them, just because I don't know why they're alone. Maybe they want to be alone. Maybe this guy, I wish he would just leave me alone because I wanted to be alone. But most people, maybe they're waiting for somebody, or maybe they're just really in need of something. And so I walked up to a guy and introduced myself, found out his name, asked him what was going on. And he sat there and he said, "I'm thinking about my wife who passed away 3 years ago, and I'm really missing her right now." And I was so grateful for the space that I had I just pulled up a chair and asked him to tell me about his wife. And I listened, and they would have been married for, I think it was 54 years had she still been alive. And that's the space that some people are coming into. And then he introduced me to who he's with. Her name was Destiny, and she started here at Region on Wednesday nights. Has found a great path to recovery and health. Now she's helping lead other people. And then she told me the story that you and I hear all the time, which is I started in the amphitheater, and then I worked my way inside, and now I'm loving it. And those are the people that we love. Yeah. We're so grateful that they're here, that they're finding out who Jesus is, and Easter is the ultimate celebration of what it's all about. And so the big theme of this Easter weekend was we know the end of the story. And we not only know the end of the Passion Week, the resurrection from the tomb, but we're also promised how the end of all of it, like the end of all of our stories ends. And so, Dante, as you not only lead people, but even live your own personal faith, when we go with that theme of knowing the end of the story, how knowing that Jesus has won and is going to win again, how does that give you a different look on life? How does it change the way that you operate every day?
Yeah, I think for me, when I really started to accept that, I had to understand what winning looked like, because in my own mind, like winning was something totally different, and so it took me a while to be like, winning is not the job, or it's not this, but there's something much greater. And when you understand like this, what Jesus did has eternal implications. It really helps you put things into perspective, because we're here for such a limited time. And if that is true, if it really is true, what do we want everybody to experience? That promise, that eternity with Jesus. And so a lot of the things that used to be important, like, and yes, we still got bills to pay. Yes, we still have responsibilities, but it helps put it in perspective. And that for me was so great. I think you alluded to it a little bit on the weekend, but I remember in seminary, I had a professor, and I was on campus, and it was just around the Easter weekend. And he said, most people live between sort of Good Friday and Easter Sunday. And it was such a great tidbit for me to take away. Like, what would you actually do if you really believed it was true?
Yeah. The reason I love Easter so much is because we're celebrating something that happened, not something that we came up with or something that we're hoping might be true, but it is a response to a historical event. We're remembering something that actually happened. And so, I said it this weekend, but sometimes people think that this is a set of beliefs or hopes that help us get through the hard times, or that this is what we wish was true because I'm having a hard time and I just need something to soothe my soul. But what we're saying is that Jesus literally, physically resurrected from the dead. And because of that, it changes everything. So what's the difference, if you were helping someone try to understand, what's the difference between hopes and wishes? Like often the way maybe a cynic or a skeptic would say it is that this is a crutch for people who need something in this life. Look at me, I'm so tough, I don't need a crutch. You need a crutch in your faith. Yeah. Versus hoping and wishing and making up a story versus responding to a historical moment. How is that fundamentally different?
Yeah, I think the challenge there is oftentimes when we read scripture, we kind of read it like a fable, like it's a fairy tale. But when you say like it is a historical document, so these things are actually true, and you can go through all the things and it stands up against every other historical document, and the amount of proof is there. Then we say, okay, then I'm responding to what is true. And then my life looks radically different, because if it is true, at the end of my life, I know where I'm going. I know what's happening, because we know the end. And this is what Jesus says, that you'll go into heaven. And so it's not simply, it's something that I fall back on when times are hard. It's my 911 emergency plan. It's like, no, this is what actually happened. This is the truth, and this is the promise of that truth. Now, on the flip side of that, the promise of that truth is not that in this life you won't have trouble. It's quite the opposite. It's like you will have trouble. The promise is that he'll walk with us through the trouble. And I think when you start to see those things, like it changes your perspective on how do you navigate life, right? He says, I am the good shepherd. I am that one that stands there. And when you think of, nobody ever wants to be a sheep, right? They're not that bright. They're brighter than I think we are, but it's like, it's not the one animal you would say.
It's also a lot. It's a very apt description of who we are, if we're being honest. Like, yeah.
But in reality, it's like, all right, like who would you choose to follow? We all have to follow somebody. Like, don't you want to follow the guy who said, I love you so much, I'm going to send my son to die for you. And if you believe in this, the promise is you will have everlasting life.
Yeah. I think we said this weekend that it doesn't mean life will be comfortable, but it means we will be comforted. Yeah. And those are two different things. And honestly, most of us, we gravitate toward the first one. Like, won't need to be comforted if everything's already comfortable. Can we just skip to that version? But if you think about the moments in your life where you've grown the most, where you've increased your faith, well, you didn't increase your faith has grown the most, when your character was shaped the most, I'll just speak for myself. It was never in the moments where I was doing what I already knew how to do,
Right.
where I was surrounded by people that already loved me, where everything was easy and just fell in my lap. It was always the moments where I was dealing with disappointment, loss. I was having my identity crises, whatever it's been. And so, but what I can do is it doesn't minimize the pain. Like you and I, we get to meet people every single week who are in the middle of it. They're going through it.
Yeah.
But we have something that already happened and a promise that hasn't yet come true, but we believe it will because of the first one that came true. The resurrection gives me hope in the second coming. The resurrection gives me hope in heaven. And so I get to live in the middle of those two things. And it doesn't mean it's easy, but it does mean I can live with confidence and courage and experience some comfort.
Yeah.
Now, I always want to be careful about this because we're celebrating. Those of us that are convinced, we're all in. It's changed our lives. It fundamentally changed our relationship with death and one another and God and the Bible and like all of it. Then there's some people that don't yet agree with all that. They're just not yet in. And you got friends, I got friends in that same camp. And so I think one of the things as Christians sometimes we can do is because we want to we have such a heart for them that we want them to believe, or sometimes we get so defensive because how could you dare doubt the thing that I believe that's the most important thing about us? We can kind of flare up with a little like dismissiveness or sarcasm or let me argue you into believing all this. And I would really encourage anyone that if you have a friend that has some doubts, has some skepticism, maybe even they get sarcastic and dismissive of you, the way you respond in that moment is so important because it's going to set you up for influence, or it's going to set you up for a very quiet audience that's not really receiving what you have to say. One of the dynamics that I've always been encouraged by to think about is when I'm thinking about a skeptic's position, or when I'm talking to a friend that doesn't yet believe, can I represent what they believe in a way that they would agree with? Like, instead of going to a straw man argument or instead of being like sarcastic or dismissive, say, I actually get where you're coming from. And with the resurrection, I think it would be fair of us, even those that are fully convinced. It's not something I've experienced before. Like it's rare, obviously. And so when you think about what evidence have you looked at that has given you confidence that this thing that has never happened before, ever again, Jesus is the one, that it's believable? What are the evidences that you take in that gives you confidence?
Yeah, I loved kind of going through the story of the resurrection, and then some of the things in the Bible too that are super interesting. Is like the first witness was a woman, and so back in those times, the women historically, like, they would not have been included, but the Bible does this include her. And as I've kind of tried to dig a little bit deeper, it is for me, who is very cerebral, wants to think through everything. Like, okay, how do we know Jesus was a real person? All right. And then you kind of go through, okay, how do we know Caesar was a real person? Like, there's all these measures that they have in scholarly, and I'm not as scholarly as I would like to be, but all those things for Jesus, like most historians say he was an actual guy who actually exists, who actually did the thing. So that for me was like the first big check. Like, okay, I'm with that. He actually was a guy that exists. And then just through the eyewitness reports, but I think the one that just cemented it for me was the disciples. Because when you look at their lives afterwards, there is no good logical excuse or reasoning that I would subject myself to what they subjected themselves to a lie. It just doesn't add up to me. And it was like these guys were so convinced that what they ended up doing was starting a worldwide revolution. And for most of them, it cost them their lives in a horrible way, being martyred.
You know, the actual text that we read wasn't some revisionist history looking back of like, let's pick a guy that used to live a long time ago and we'll make him the Messiah and then we'll build a whole religion around it. it was written so close to Jesus's death and resurrection that the eyewitnesses were still around, to where Paul writes, Jesus appeared to 500 people after his resurrection. They're still around. Like, fact check me. He was basically saying, he wasn't saying the Bible says it, so you should believe it. Check your brain at the door. He said there's evidence. Like, there's people that are still around to justify all this, or to corroborate all these stories. And so I just wouldn't want anyone to think that this is a nice feel-good story that you got to believe, but you got to check your brain at the door because there's some unbelievable aspects. There is a supernatural part of our faith. Like, we believe that Jesus is God and that this was a miraculous rising from the dead, but there's also evidence that it happened. Yeah. And if it happened, it changed everything. So I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier, which was, if I really love someone, care about them, and I believe this, say I got those two things are true. Yeah. I should want to share it with everybody that I know. Like, and I know that's easy to say on a podcast. It's easy to say at church. And then you go to work on Monday, it's like, no, it's a little different. Or I go to school and I'm in the cafeteria and I'm hanging with my friends and I'm trying to figure out the way to bring it up because I actually do those things. I'm really convinced that Jesus is real. I really love these people. I want to bring those two together. Yeah. How have you found both success and, let's just be real, we haven't won all the time. And so how have you found favor when trying to bring people to the Jesus that you know and love?
Yeah, I think in that setting, me trying to help a friend of mine, I've adopted this saying, and it's really helped me. It is that my job, my role is not to change anybody. My role is not to change their mind. It is simply to make the introduction. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we go into these conversations, and where it's gone wrong for me is I feel like I got to be the one to change them. I got to be the one to do the heart rearranging. And that's just not the case. I feel like it's more like, hey, like, he's changed my life, and I think he can do the same for you. Would you let me introduce you? Yeah. And here's what I know. I don't know it all. You're going to have questions that I can't answer. You're going to have things that I don't know, but here's something to help me going to church. And it's one of the reasons I became a pastor, because of the role that faith has played in my life. And I said, if I could just share that with one or two people, and their life becomes better for it, then I'll be good. And so that's kind of the thing. It's like, hey, my job, not to change anybody, just make the introduction.
Yeah. I think trusting that God loves them more than I do. So he wants this even more than I do. Mm-hmm. I can be the introduction. I'm certainly going to be the example. So my life is already making a case for or against Jesus, if we're being honest. And so he doesn't need my help to be convincible or to, he doesn't need me to defend him. I can come along and introduce my friends. I can speak truth in love, but I don't need to put a cape on my back and pretend like I'm Superman. I've got to save the day. So let's wrap up with this one. So we said, if Jesus really rose from the dead, overcame our ultimate enemy, death, promises that one day he's going to make all the wrong things right again. He's going to make all the bad things good again. He is going to respond to our faith in him. All right, so we know that that's coming. How should that give us more courage today? You know, what if that is truly the end and it's predetermined and it's set, not in doubt? How should that give us more courage as we go about today? Whoever's listening today, you got decisions on your hands, you got relationships in your life. Why, Dante, should that give us more courage, knowing what's already happened and what's about to happen?
Yeah, I think it's like that idea, and I sort of love this analogy that you painted for us. Like, when you know the end of the story, it gives you that much more confidence. Like, I know how this is. I know how it goes. And if the end of the story is that, what then is the role that I want to play in making sure that is exalted, that is glorified? Mm-hmm. And so I always tell some of the young guys that I talk to is, when you know where you're going, it makes things that much easier. So every decision I make should be like, does it get me closer to that? Does it get me closer to that end goal? And when we decide that Jesus paid the price on that cross, he rose again, and because of that, my eternity is secure if I believe, then I'm saying, like, all right, that is the main thing. That then becomes the center, and then everything else becomes true. Everything else that he said is true. So then I try to orient my life around that, and it gives me the confidence to say that when I'm out there doing it, I know this, I know that, and the more I walk in it, the more I begin to feel it, and it just does something internally to us that I think builds your courage, because you know the end of the story.
I would hope that it would be a comforting and inspirational reality, that we know how it ends. And I heard one pastor say, if that's true, then whatever we're going through right now, it's going to be okay. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be comfortable. It doesn't mean that it gets easier. It doesn't mean that it goes our way, but it will be okay at the end of it all. Yeah. And so we don't say that as some kind of Band-Aid over real pain. We don't say that as some kind of wishful thinking that's supposed to make the realities of life disappear. But it's true. It's true that if Jesus did what he said he did, and if he's going to do what he says he's going to do, which I wholeheartedly believe, then at the end of it all, it's going to be okay. We'll be with him forever. All the tears will be wiped away. All the pain will be gone. All the diseases will be eradicated. We will be in perfect community with a perfect God. And that is what we have to look forward to. And so that all is tied. The reason that we have confidence in that is because of a historical event that really happened. Jesus rose from the dead. So as you're listening today, I'm hoping you'll be thinking through how can I live today differently because I know what Jesus has done and what he's promised to do. How can I be more courageous in my conversations and be willing to risk a little bit of relational equity because I love them that much and I want them to know? Am I courageous enough to say yes to the invitation I've received here at Real Life to step into a little bit more leadership? Am I willing to be more generous with my limited resources because I know how the story ends? I want to invest in that. And so it really does affect every layer of our lives. And I'm hoping that you will directly tie your courageous living to the resurrection of Jesus and say, because of what he did, I'm willing to do this. Man, hope you were able to enjoy Easter Real Life with us, but we're not done. We keep coming back every single week because it is that good and it's that meaningful. Excited for this new series called Trust the Process, where we're going to be diving into a book of the Bible that shows us how God is involved in everyday life, normal people's lives, but we need a little training to see it. It's a thing called providence, where God is providing for us when we don't even know it. Often it requires hindsight, looking back in our life to see it. But when we do, it gives us confidence for tomorrow. So excited to kick off that series. We will see you at Real Life this weekend.